Ciao, mabuhay! You are watching The Word Exposed. Let us behold Jesus, the Word incarnate, revealing Himself to us in the Sunday readings. Today is the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and the Gospel narrates the familiar story of Bartimaeus, how Jesus healed him and restored his sight. This scene illustrates the popularity of Jesus at the time. There is a sizable crowd, and the blind Bartimaeus is heard crying out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." For doing so, he is rebuked by many. They want him to keep quiet. But Jesus stops for Bartimaeus, even asking his disciples to call him. Friends, the Lord listens to our cries. He hears our pleas for compassion. His compassionate heart is touched by the faith of Bartimaeus. But Jesus also desires that his disciples reach out to the many Bartimaeuses who are on the margins and who are suffering. Will we follow Jesus? Will we reach out to the sick, those rebuked for articulating their need for help, those who are silenced? Will we tell them and assure them, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is here for you"? And will we be humble like Bartimaeus to ask for Jesus' compassion?
First reading. A reading from the book of the prophet Jeremiah. Thus says the Lord, "Shout with joy for Jacob, exult at the head of the nations, proclaim your praise and say, the Lord has delivered his people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them back from the land of the north. I will gather them from the ends of the world, with the blind and the lame in their midst, the mothers and those with child. They shall return as an immense throng. They departed in tears, but I will console them and guide them. I will lead them to brooks of water on a level road, so that none shall stumble. For I am a father to Israel. Ephraim is my firstborn." The word of the Lord. Second reading. A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, every high priest is taken from among men and made the representative before God to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal patiently with the ignorant and erring, for he himself is beset by weakness, and so, for this reason, must make sin offerings for himself as well as for the people. No one takes this honor upon himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. In the same way, it was not Christ who glorified himself in becoming high priest, but rather the one who said to him, "You are my son. This day I have begotten you." Just as he says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." The word of the Lord.
Begging for compassion. I know that some people say, "I will not beg. I will not ask for anything. I want to be self-sufficient." Well, there is a virtue in striving to be, as you said, self-sufficient or to provide for our own needs. But there is also nothing wrong to recognize that we need God and we need others, especially when we are begging for God's compassion. In a world where hearts are hardened, I think we should recover, this sense of humility, this sense that of a healthy person and lifestyle, that we can beg for mercy and compassion. In the first reading from the prophet Jeremiah, we are given a vision of the compassion of God, the God who was hurt by his people's infidelity, the God who, in a way, allowed the people Israel to experience the consequence of her infidelity, which is dispersion, scattering, and some even being brought to exile in the foreign lands. But the compassion of God surfaces. God will lead this remnant of Israel back home. God will gather them from all the nations. God, as it were, will reverse the consequence of Israel's hard-headedness, this stiff-necked people, these people who declared independence from God. God will reverse it. The scattering will be reversed by gathering. They who were sent away from home will be brought back home. And in their midst will be the blind and the lame, the poor for whom God had a special love. He will guide them, the mothers, the children, and the mothers who are with child. The most vulnerable will be part of that procession, which is a procession organized, as it were, by the compassionate God who says, "I will be a father to them." Yes. So the heart of God, the compassionate God, is being presented. Will Israel beg for forgiveness? Will Israel rely on the compassion of God? Or will Israel continue in its ways of pride and self-sufficiency? We hope Israel would learn how to beg forgiveness and mercy, for God is compassionate. In the second reading from the letter to the Hebrews, we are back to the image of the high priest. And the high priest, the other high priests, who are sinful and also weak as the other people. And so they offer sacrifices not only for them, for the others, but for themselves. But then we have Jesus, the high priest. The letter to the Hebrews says, even Jesus does not attribute to himself the honor of being high priest. For the other high priests of Israel, no, the author of the letter to the Hebrews is reminding them, look, you may be high priests, but do not think of it as something that you deserved, something that you merited because of your human capacities and your characteristics or your criteria that you have met. No, it is by God's grace, it is by God's compassion that you, weak and sinful people, have been made high priests. Even the sinless Son of God did not claim that honor for himself. It is God's calling to him as the Son of God, who is asked by the Father to be a high priest in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of the ritual priesthood of Israel, but according to this mysterious priesthood. So Jesus, from the very start of his being high priest, is also a recipient of the grace, the calling, or call it the compassion of the Father. That's why he takes his being high priest not so much as an honor, but as a mission of compassion also for erring brothers and sisters. My dear brothers and sisters, we have a compassionate God who is always ready to show us his mercy. Will we resist in his mercy by persisting in our proud ways? Let us be humble the way Jesus is, and let us be open to the grace, mercy, and compassion of God.
The proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way, your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Begging for compassion. As I said at the beginning of our reflection, our society is promoting something that is good. You know, the search for self-sufficiency in life, lack of dependence on others. If you can do it with your own creative ways, then harness all of those things. These are all good, no? But given the human creature, the human condition, no, we will remain dependent. We will remain weak and even sinful. So begging for God's assistance, begging for the help of others is not bad. No? That act of humility, that act of being human is actually virtuous and might lead to a healthy lifestyle without abandoning, our search for creative ways to support ourselves. In the first reading from the prophet Jeremiah, God presents himself as a compassionate father, especially to Israel that has turned its back on him. Israel does not deserve compassion, but God offers it, especially to the little remnant that is remaining, and most especially to the most vulnerable, those who need help the most, the blind, the lame, the mothers, the children. But will Israel be humble enough to welcome God's compassion? Or will Israel maintain this pride? Leave us alone. We will manage our lives by ourselves. In the second reading, Jesus, our high priest, is presented as also the recipient of God's grace. He did not give the honor to himself as high priest. It was given to him by the Father, he who is the Son of God, and he was called to be a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And receiving the compassion of God as a high priest, he exercises his high priesthood as a compassionate brother to many erring sisters and brothers. Compassion breeding compassion. Now in the gospel, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, a blind person, who had spent his life on the street. That was probably his home, the street, begging. He had to live on the street to be visible to people. Because how can you beg when people don't see you? So he makes himself seen. He who is blind wants people to see his condition, in the hope that by his begging, they will be touched. Actually, he was begging not only for money or for food. He was begging them for compassion. But we don't know. We don't know whether he would always get what he begged for. Then Jesus was passing by, followed by a crowd and with his disciples. He cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, no, have pity on me." It was a cry of a beggar, but directed to a specific person, Jesus, whom he recognizes as the Son of David. You are the promised Messiah from the line of David. Have mercy on me, have compassion on me. Look at the reaction of the people. They silenced him. They wanted him to stop begging, especially from Jesus. But Jesus heard, and Jesus did not, stop him from begging. In fact, Jesus wanted the person to come to him. Jesus embodies the compassion of God in the first reading and the compassionate high priest described by the letter to the Hebrews. And he asked the person, he who is now the recipient of this message, I beg of you, have mercy on me. And he asked, what do you want? That I may see. My sight. And Jesus' compassionate heart was touched by the faith of this person. And the miracle happened. Look at this. The beggar, the one who begged for compassion from the one he believed was capable of giving it. And Jesus allowing himself to be touched. He was not the proud miracle worker. He was open to the grace of God and the witness of this beggar. So we could see that the heart of Jesus was also begging for manifestations of faith. And his heart was ready, prompt to give God's compassion. My dear brothers and sisters, let us be humble in begging for compassion. Those who are humble to admit that they need compassion will be compassionate to others. Those who claim, I don't need compassion from others, will not be merciful to others. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it. Were you able to invite people to God's banquet the last week? Hopefully, more people are now partaking of God's banquet because of you. The Church teaches us that the proper purpose of this missionary activity is evangelization. Our invitation to God's banquet becomes a proclamation of the gospel. And what is the good news? God's banquet is ready. The bridegroom is with us. He brings God's mercy, love, and salvation. This is the good news. Pope Francis has been reminding us of the proper disposition in going out and inviting people to God's banquet. In his first apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, the Pope tells us, it is hoped that the joy of God's banquet is already manifest in our missionary activity, in the way that we go out and invite people to come and see what God has prepared for each of us. After all, it is us, the messengers, who must first be convinced of the good news we are proclaiming. Remember how the apostles continued to speak about Jesus, although they were ordered by the authorities to stop. They cannot help but witness to the truth of Jesus and the good news of his resurrection, which, as we know, the Spirit enabled them to proclaim. Today, the Church continues to offer what the disciples and the martyrs of old had offered, tirelessly and joyfully. The good news of Jesus, who came to reveal the face of God and to merit salvation for all humanity by his cross and resurrection. How strong and firm is your belief in the good news of Jesus? Speaking about it with conviction and joy would be a powerful invitation to others. In Evangelii Nuntiandi, Pope St. Paul VI turned to the example of Saints Peter and Paul. Let his words inspire us as we reflect on our missionary activities.